Hello everyone, welcome you all to AIK Pathsala. In the last lecture, we have looked at how to write a recursive method for any given problem in 3 steps, and we calculated the factorial of a number using recursion. To make things more clear and more understandable, let's run the factorial function which we have discussed in last session for any integer number and see what's happening behind the scene. For simplicity, let's run this function when n equals to 4. If we run this function when n equals to 4, the control comes to the first condition over here, where it says n is greater than equal to 0 and n has to be integer number. So we see that 4 is greater than 0 and it's an integer number. So everything okay with this case over here. So it will continue to the next case. In the next case, we are checking that if n is equal to 0 or 1. We see that 4 is neither 0 nor 1. So the controller comes to the else statement over here. It says n multiplied with factorial of n minus 1. So what's the value of n right now? N is 4. So n multiplied with the return value of factorial n minus 1, which in our case 4 multiplied with factorial of 3. So we don't know the return value of factorial 3 over here, which means that our controller will call this function recursively. So the controller once again goes to the first line over here. Here again we check that whether 3 is greater than 0 and if it is an integer number. We see that all cases are okay here. So we continue to the next if condition. Here we see that n is not 0 or 1. So the controller will continue to do else condition. Now, one more time in else condition, we have a return value which is n multiplied with factorial of n minus 1. So in our case, n is 3. So it will be 3 multiplied with factorial of 2. So here one more time, we see that we don't have any return value for factorial 2, which means that our function will be called recursively once again. So the controller will go to the first line again over here. Here we don't have any problem for 2 again because 2 is an integer number which is greater than 0. So it will continue to the next condition. And in the next condition, 2 is neither 0 nor 1, which means that this controller will go to the else condition as well. In else condition, we have n multiplied with factorial of n minus 1. One more time, which means that in this case, it will be 2 multiplied with 2 minus 1, which is 2 into factorial of 1. So when we call our function with parameter of 1, so the controller one more time goes here. It understands that 1 is greater than 0 and 1 is an integer number. Then it goes to the next condition. Here we see that n is equal to 1, which means that this function over here will return 1. So the return value for this function over here is 1. So if we have a return value for this function over here, factorial 1, so we can easily calculate the return value for this function factorial 2, which is taking the parameter of 2. So the return value for factorial 2 is 2 multiplied with the return value for factorial 1. So this will give me the return value for factorial 2 over here, which is 2. Now, once again, we can calculate the return value for factorial 3 over here, which is 3 multiplied with the return value for factorial 2. So here 3 multiplied with 2 will give me the return value for factorial 3, that is 6. Here we can see that the return value for factorial 4 can be calculated by multiplying 4 with the return value for factorial 3. So 4 multiplied by 6 is 24. So finally we will get the return value for factorial 4 as 24. So this is how the recursive method defined the factorial of any given number. Here I try to show you that when you call a factorial function recursively, what's happening behind the scene. You saw that every time the function calls another function, which is one less, until it reaches the base condition that have a return value. So if you don't provide the base condition over here, our function will be inside the infinite loop. Now, in this lecture, we have introduced you how to write recursive method in 3 steps, and hopefully you understand it. And I gave an example of factorial using these 3 steps to write a recursive code. Hopefully everything is clear now. See you in the next session. Keep learning, keep smiling.